Allison Muir. Welcome back for another Tool Time Tuesday. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the shear that is offered by Kevin Potter at Potter USA. One of the first things that I need to do though is mount it onto my surface so that I can make certain that it's secure and not going to fall off and hurt me, or my students, or damage any other items that are here in the studio. The first thing that I need to do is I need to remove the shear plate that comes with the press. And this acts as a table, which is really nice, and you'll see that in just a moment as I demonstrate this. But I do need to remove this so that I can have access to the shear legs and I can bolt those down. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove our guide. And then I just have an Allen wrench, and I will remove the nuts here, or the bolts and the nuts underneath it. A little easier said than done at this direction. And just about there. Set those off to the side and do the same thing for the other end. In this case, I have already positioned it where I would like to have this mounted on my top of my table here. So I'll use a pencil to come in and just trace around inside of the leg holes here. Where I'm going to be drilling. Alright, once I have that, I can move my shear out of the way and then begin to drill my holes. In my case, I've purchased 1.5 inch bolts that are also 3/8 inch wide, so they're not too big, and 1.5 inch was enough to clear through the top of my table, so that worked for me. I also purchased washers and bolts, or nuts rather, to go on the underside. Now before you get too far and start drilling all of your holes, it's a good option to take a second and just verify that everything is lined up where it should be. So what I like to do is I will take 2 of my bolts and just fit them in just to verify that everything is where it should be. Double check to see where I have my holes marked here and make any adjustments that might be necessary at this point in time. So this one was off just a smidge, and this one would be pretty good. Now another thing that's going to help me out on this is that the holes that I am drilling are slightly larger than what my screws are, as well as the holes in my shear are slightly larger than what my drill bit or what my screws are. So that will give me a little bit of playroom if I need to move things a little bit. Alright, so now I have all of the holes drilled, and at this point I will just take these nuts, or the bolts rather, and position them in. Just kind of verify everything at this point fits. So now what I need to do is come in from the underside and lock everything down. I'll put the washer on and then my nut, and then my table will be my bench will be secured to my table, and I can put the shear table back on in place. You may find it helpful to have somebody come in and hold the nuts down so that you can tighten up the bolts. Okay. Alright, once your shear is secure, then you can go back about setting your table back into place. At this point, I can go back in and set the table back on and secure it. Again, just by inserting the screws that it comes with and putting on your washer and securing the nut underneath. Make sure everything's tightened up. At this point, I can set this ruler guide back into place and tighten it down. You may find that this needs to be removed from time to time. If I'm working with a larger sheet of metal that needs to be scooted back as I'm making my cuts, I can take this off and the little screws that hold it into place. Otherwise, it's kind of a nice little guide so that you can see how far you've gone with your metal or whatever else. So I like to use that as kind of a guide as I'm cutting my material. Nice thing about this shear is that it has been adjusted. A lot of times you can buy these shears, and this is actually a fairly inexpensive shear, but what Kevin has done is taken it and adjusted it to make certain that it's going to cut the way that you need to. At this point, I could actually cut through paper very easily. He's got it so tight on here. Let me grab some metal and I'll show you how to use this. Using the shear is actually very easy to do. So we have our guide here that will act as a straight edge if that's something that we need. Here in this case, I actually have some metal that's not very thick. It's only about 5.5 inches. And yet that's pretty much what you have to work with as far as the cutting blade goes. It's a 6-inch cutting blade, but you know, sometimes you have to kind of move that metal back. If you need to move your metal back to make a longer cut, then I would just remove these 2 screws here and then remove the straight edge. These just pull right off, and then you have that whole table that you can then go through and use to push your metal through. So in this case, I have very thin metal. I believe this is like 28 gauge, so it's pretty thin. And I've already created 3 lines so that I'm going to be cutting 3 1-inch strips. If you have thicker stock, or even if you have thinner stock and you would like to use this, what you can do with this is push this down, and then you can roll it down, and that's going to allow you to hold your metal into place. That's very handy also if you have very thick stock. So in this case, I don't really need that. So what I like to do is just come in and line up my marks that I have created with the cutting edge on the shear here. I'm going to hold this down, and I'm going to actually apply quite a bit of pressure so that as I shear it, there's going to be a tendency for the metal to want to be pulled in and moved into the shear. So I'm going to hold this down to kind of hold that into place. Alright? Very, very simple, very easy. There's my cut. It's nice and straight. A little bit of a curve to this, but there was also a bit of a curve to begin with. So there's not a whole lot extra on this. However, you will notice a little bit more curling with this type of a shear versus that of a guillotine shear. So again, I'm just going to come back in, line everything up nice and neat. The straight edge helps me to make certain that I'm actually staying into position. Here we go. One more time. Just going to cut that. Very slick little movement. Nice thing about this shear is there is also a hole right in here, and it's obviously difficult to see in this video, but there is a hole right here, and you can actually stick your stock through that and bring your shear down, and it will cut that. So you have a way to cut thick stock, and you have a way to cut your sheet metal as well. So it's a really great tool. It's also very affordable, especially if you are considering, you know, between this and a guillotine shear. They do 2 different things. However, this is going to be quite a bit more affordable. So just something to kind of think about. It's nice that Kevin has added the table here, and that allows you to work with longer pieces of stock, and that will be something that you might find helpful. So all in all, it's a great little tool to have in your studio. Does not take up much room, and you saw how easy it was to attach it. Have fun!